The chandelier above the dining table cast perfect shadows across my mother-in-law's face. Patricia Whitmore sat at the head of the mahogany table like a queen holding court. Her husband, Theodore, mirrored her posture at the opposite end. Between them stretched 12 feet of polished wood, crystal glasses, and the kind of silence that costs money to create. I was cutting into my overcooked chicken when Patricia set down her wine glass. The gentle clink against the table made everyone freeze. She dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin, the movement so practiced it looked choreographed. "Naomi," she said, and the way she pronounced my name made it sound like a diagnosis. "Theodore and I have been discussing something rather important." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Across from me, Caleb's sister Victoria smirked into her salad. His brother, Lawrence, suddenly became fascinated with his phone. "We feel it's time to address the elephant in the room," Theodore added, his voice carrying that corporate boardroom authority he wielded like a weapon. I glanced at Caleb. He was staring at his plate, jaw tight, breathing slowly through his nose. That's when I knew. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Patricia leaned forward slightly. "You simply don't have the pedigree, background, or refinement this family requires." The room held its breath. I set my fork down carefully. My hand didn't shake, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape. The word "requires" echoed in my head, as if marrying their son was a job application I'd somehow fraudulently passed. "Excuse me." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Oh, don't be dramatic, dear." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "We're simply being honest. Honesty is a family value here." Theodore nodded. "You come from a very different background, Naomi. Your parents are lovely people, I'm sure, but they're not our kind of people." Victoria finally looked up from her salad, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. She'd been waiting for this moment since the day Caleb brought me home. Lawrence kept his eyes on his phone, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward. "Not your kind," I repeated slowly. "What kind is that exactly?" "Refined," Patricia said, as if explaining something to a child. "Educated at the right institutions. Connected to the right families. Aware of certain social expectations. I have a master's degree from a state school," Theodore interrupted. "Yes, we know." The contempt in his voice made my stomach turn. I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for that degree. I'd written papers until my eyes blurred and hands cramped. That diploma wasn't just paper to me. Caleb's knuckles had gone white around his fork. He still wasn't looking up, but something in his posture had changed. His shoulders had squared. His breathing had slowed even more. I recognized that stance. It was the one he used before making a business deal that would change everything. "You're very quiet, Caleb," Patricia observed, her tone sharpening. "Surely you have something to contribute to this conversation." "I warned you this would happen," he said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victoria's head snapped up. Lawrence actually lowered his phone. Theodore's water glass paused halfway to his lips. Patricia's perfectly maintained expression cracked just slightly around the edges. "What did you say?" she asked. Caleb finally looked up. His eyes were calm, almost eerily so. "I said I warned you this would happen. 7 months ago, actually. In the study. Remember that conversation, Dad?" Theodore's jaw clenched. "Caleb, this is neither the time nor." "You told me you'd never accept Naomi," Caleb continued, his voice level but carrying across the room like a judge delivering a verdict. "You said she'd never be good enough. You used almost those exact words." Patricia's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace. "We were speaking in hypotheticals. We simply wanted you to understand." "You wanted me to leave her," Caleb said flatly. "You gave me an ultimatum. Her or the family legacy." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. I stared at Caleb. He'd never told me about this conversation. Not once in 7 months had he mentioned an ultimatum. My mind raced backward through our relationship, looking for signs I'd missed. The way he'd insisted on a prenup that protected my assets, not his. The way he'd slowly pulled back from family dinners. The way he always asked if I was okay after we visited his parents. He'd been building a wall between me and them. I just hadn't realized it was for protection. Caleb, Patricia's voice had gone brittle. You're being ridiculous. We were simply concerned about compatibility. Stop. The single word from Caleb cut through her sentence like a knife through silk. You humiliated my wife at your dinner table. You did exactly what I told you not to do. So now we do this my way. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. The paper was heavy, expensive. The kind used by lawyers who charge by the hour. He slid it across the table toward his parents. Theodore picked it up, his hands not quite steady. His eyes scanned the letterhead, and I watched his face go pale. This is from Henderson and Associates. Yes, Caleb said. Open it. Patricia leaned over her husband's shoulder as he broke the seal. Her eyes moved across the page once, twice. Then she looked up at her son with something I'd never seen in her face before. Fear. You can't be serious, Patricia whispered. Read it out loud, Mom, Caleb said. His voice was gentle but unyielding. So everyone knows. Theodore cleared his throat. His usually commanding voice came out rough. This letter serves as formal notification that Caleb James Whitmore has established an irrevocable trust, transferring all assets held in his name, including but not limited to. His voice broke. Victoria snatched the letter from her father's hands. Her eyes widened as she read. You moved everything. The investment portfolio. The real estate holdings. Even the shares in Dad's company. That's my inheritance, Theodore said, his voice rising. Those were gifts, Caleb. You can't just. They were gifts, Caleb agreed calmly. Which means they're legally mine to do with as I please. And I please to put them somewhere you can't threaten to take them away. Patricia's hand was pressed against her chest. When did you do this? The day after our conversation in the study, Caleb said. The day you told me I needed to choose between my wife and my family. Chose my wife. I've been choosing her every day since. I felt something hot and painful lodge in my throat. He'd protected me before I even knew I needed protection. While I was worrying about which fork to use at family dinners, he was building a fortress. You lost control the moment you disrespected me, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Patricia's eyes snapped to mine. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw her mask slip completely. Beneath the polish and poise was something raw. Not quite rage. Not quite panic. A hybrid of both that made her look suddenly older. This is your influence, she hissed. You manipulated him into. I manipulated no one, I cut her off. I didn't even know about the trust until 30 seconds ago. Lawrence finally spoke up. Wait, so you did this without telling her? Caleb nodded. Naomi doesn't need to manipulate anyone. She's never asked me for anything. Never pushed me away from my family. Never demanded I choose sides. He looked directly at his mother. You did that all on your own. Theodore stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You're making a terrible mistake. That money, those assets, they're your future. Your security. No, Dad. They were my leash. Caleb stood as well, mirroring his father's stance. They were the same height, the same build, but Caleb looked larger somehow. You've been using money to control me my entire life. Do what we say or we'll cut you off. Marry who we approve or lose your inheritance. I'm done playing that game. This is insane, Victoria said, though she sounded less certain now. You're throwing away millions because of one dinner conversation. No, I said quietly. He protected millions from people who would use them as weapons. Patricia's face had gone from pale to flushed. Why would you do this to us? The question hung in the air. I watched Caleb's expression soften slightly, but not with sympathy. With something sadder. Resignation, maybe. Or the grief of accepting something he'd known for a long time. "Because you'd do it to her," he said simply. 4 words. They landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward into silence. Theodore opened his mouth, closed it. Lawrence looked down at his phone again, but this time I saw his hand shaking slightly. Victoria's smugness had evaporated entirely. "I know you, Mom. Dad." Caleb's voice was gentle now, which somehow made it worse. "I know how you operate. If I'd kept those assets under your control, you would have used them against Naomi. Made veiled threats. Suggested that maybe if she left, things would be easier. Hinted that her presence was jeopardizing my future." "We would never," Patricia started. "You absolutely would," Caleb interrupted. "You did it to Lawrence's first girlfriend. You did it to Victoria's college boyfriend. You've done it every time one of us brought home someone who didn't meet your impossible standards." Victoria's cheeks colored. Lawrence's grip on his phone tightened. Apparently they remembered too. "So yes, I moved the money before you could weaponize it. I protected my wife before you could hurt her worse than you already have." The dinner ended badly. Or maybe it ended perfectly, depending on your perspective. Lawrence left without saying goodbye. Victoria tried to pull Caleb aside for a private conversation, but he refused. Theodore locked himself in his study. Patricia stood in the foyer, watching us leave with an expression I couldn't quite read. 2 days later I found out what that expression meant. I was at my book club meeting when my phone started buzzing. 3 texts from my friend Amanda, who moved in the same social circles as Caleb's parents. Then another from my former co-worker, whose husband played golf with Theodore. Then my own mother, confused and concerned. I excused myself to the hallway and called Amanda back. "What's going on?" "Yes. You haven't heard." She sounded breathless with gossip. "Patricia Whitmore has been making calls all morning. She's telling everyone that you're controlling Caleb, that you've isolated him from his family, that you're after his money." My stomach dropped. "She's lying." "I know that," Amanda said quickly. "Anyone who actually knows you knows that. But Naomi, she's Patricia Whitmore. People listen to her. And some of them..." She trailed off. "Some of them believe her," I finished. "Some of them want to believe her," Amanda corrected. "It's better drama that way." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. Course. Patricia couldn't control Caleb anymore, so she tried to control the narrative instead. Paint me as the villain in their family story. But Patricia's whisper campaign had an unexpected flaw. She'd underestimated how many people had been waiting for the Whitmores to fall. Within a week, the story had morphed. Someone leaked details about the dinner, about what Patricia and Theodore had actually said to me. I didn't know who. Later I suspected Victoria, though she never admitted it. Whatever guilt or loyalty she'd been clinging to had apparently dissolved when she realized her parents had tried to scapegoat me. The social elite of Ridgeway Heights loves nothing more than watching the powerful stumble. And the Whitmores were stumbling. Patricia's planned charity gala lost 3 major sponsors. Theodore found himself uninvited from a golf tournament he'd played in for 20 years. The private messages started, people reaching out to me with carefully worded sympathy and thinly veiled curiosity. Then came the phone call I never expected. I was making coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Naomi Whitmore. The voice was older, female, with the kind of authority that comes from decades of getting what you want. "Yes. This is Constance Thornberry. I believe you know my daughter Victoria." I nearly dropped my phone. Constance Thornberry was Patricia's mother. Caleb's grandmother. The matriarch of the entire family. "Mrs. Thornberry," I managed. "I'd like to invite you to lunch," she said. "Just you and I. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the Riverside Club." It wasn't really a request. The Riverside Club was exactly what it sounded like. Old money, older wood paneling, and waitstaff who'd been there so long they remembered when women weren't allowed in the main dining room. Constance Thornberry sat at a corner table, her back straight, her white hair perfectly coiffed, her expression unreadable. She didn't stand when I approached, just gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. Sat. She studied me for a long moment, her blue eyes sharp despite her age. You're prettier than Patricia described. More composed, too. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. My daughter is a fool, Constance said flatly. Always has been. Too concerned with appearances, not concerned enough with substance. A waiter appeared, poured water, disappeared like smoke. Theodore too, Constance continued. He married into this family thinking money equals class. It doesn't. Mrs. Thornberry. Constance. She picked up her water glass. We're family after all. And I want you to understand something, Naomi. What Patricia did to you at that dinner. She did the same thing to me 40 years ago. And blinked. I'm sorry. Not to me directly. To my first daughter-in-law. Patricia's husband before Theodore. She took a sip of water. I told Patricia she wasn't good enough. That she didn't understand our world. That my son could do better. The parallel hit me like cold water. I was wrong, Constance said. And my son divorced her anyway, married Patricia, and has been miserable ever since. Constance leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was a painting she was considering buying. Patricia is repeating my mistakes. The difference is, Caleb is smart enough not to repeat his father's. I don't understand why you're telling me this, I said carefully. Because yesterday Patricia called me crying. Said her son had betrayed her. Said you'd poisoned him against the family. Said she was being ostracized by everyone who matters. Constance's expression didn't change. So I asked her one simple question. What question? Did you actually call Naomi those things at dinner? I held my breath. She said yes. Said it was for Caleb's own good. Said someone needed to make you understand your place. Constance set her glass down with a decisive clink. So I told her she was no longer welcome at my estate. Not until she apologizes to you. Properly. Publicly. My mouth fell open. You cut her off. I established boundaries, Constance corrected. Something I should have done decades ago. She signaled the waiter. Now let's order lunch. And you're going to tell me exactly what happened at that dinner. No sugar-coating. No polite editing. I want the truth. So I told her. Everything. The timing, the words, the way the family had sat there and watched it happen. The way Caleb had prepared for this months in advance because he knew his parents would eventually strike. By the time I finished, our food had arrived and gone cold. Constance hadn't touched hers. She just listened, her expression growing harder with each detail. You need to speak publicly, Constance said finally. I don't want to make this worse. It's already worse. Patricia is controlling the narrative. You need to state your boundaries clearly. Not for revenge. For self-respect. She pulled out her phone, an expensive model I suspected Victoria had set up for her. The Ridgeway Women's Association is having their monthly meeting next week. You'll speak. I'm not a member. You are now. I'm sponsoring you. She typed something into her phone. You'll have 10 minutes. Tell them what happened. Tell them what you expect. And do not, under any circumstances, apologize for existing. My hands were shaking. What if it makes things worse with Caleb's family? Worse than being told you're not good enough. Worse than being blamed for your husband's reasonable decisions. Constance's eyes bored into mine. You're already the villain in Patricia's story, dear. You might as well be a villain who stands up for herself. 3 days later, Patricia and Theodore called. Not me, of course. They called Caleb requesting a private meeting. Just the three of them. No spouses. Caleb put the call on speaker so I could hear. That's not going to work, he said. This is family business, Theodore insisted. Naomi is my family, Caleb said. If you want to meet, she'll be there. There was a long pause. Then Patricia's voice, tight with forced sweetness. Of course. We simply wanted to apologize in private, without embarrassing anyone. Apologize now then, Caleb said. I'm listening. Another pause. Longer this time. On the phone. Patricia sounded horrified. You humiliated my wife in public. The least you can do is apologize with her present. The pause stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Theodore cleared his throat. We may have spoken too harshly, he said carefully. Each word sounded like it hurt coming out. At dinner. Things were said in the heat of the moment. What things? Caleb asked. Silence. You said Naomi didn't have the right pedigree, Caleb continued. You said she didn't have the right background. You said she wasn't refined enough. Which part was the heat of the moment? Caleb, don't be difficult, Patricia said. We're trying to extend an olive branch here. No, you're trying to save face. There's a difference. He looked at me, raising an eyebrow. He nodded. We're not interested in apologies that only exist to make you feel better. If you want to rebuild this relationship, you'll need to actually address what you did wrong. We already said. You said words. You didn't mean them. Caleb's voice was patient but firm. When you're ready to have an honest conversation, call back. He hung up. I stared at him. You just hung up on your parents. I just refused to participate in performative apologizing. He pulled me close. They're not sorry they hurt you. They're sorry it didn't work. There's a difference. 2 weeks later, Caleb came home with an envelope. Not a legal one this time. Just regular mail. He set it on the kitchen counter and looked at me. I got a job offer, he said. In Seattle. My heart jumped. Seattle. It's a good position. Better than what I have here. More autonomy, better salary. He paused. It's also 3,000 miles from my parents. We moved to Seattle 6 weeks later. The house sale happened fast. The job transition happened faster. Caleb worked with a focused intensity I'd rarely seen, like he was afraid someone might change his mind if he slowed down. His parents didn't take it well. Patricia called 11 times the day we told them. Theodore showed up at our house twice, trying to convince Caleb this was career suicide. Victoria sent a series of increasingly desperate texts about abandoning the family. Lawrence, interestingly, sent a single message. Good for you. The day before we left, Patricia requested one final family dinner. On neutral ground this time. A restaurant neither family frequented. She promised it would be civil. Caleb looked at me. Your call. Thought about it. About giving them one more chance. About the small part of me that still hoped for some kind of reconciliation. About the larger part of me that knew better. One dinner, I said. But we leave the moment anyone crosses a line. No second chances. No making excuses. So we went. The restaurant was nice but not ostentatious. Patricia and Theodore were already seated when we arrived, both dressed more casually than I'd ever seen them. Patricia even stood to hug Caleb, though she didn't quite meet my eyes. Thank you for coming, she said. We ordered. Made small talk about the weather, about Seattle, about the new house. It was almost normal. Almost comfortable. I started to relax. Then dessert arrived. You know, Patricia said, her tone light and conversational. It's not too late to change your mind about Seattle. Caleb's jaw tightened. Mom. I'm just saying there are opportunities here. Good opportunities. If you'd just be willing to compromise a little. The word compromise hung in the air like smoke. I knew what it meant. Compromise your wife. Compromise your boundaries. Come back to us on our terms. I set down my fork carefully. What kind of compromise? Patricia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Well, for instance, you could maintain a residence here. Visit regularly. Make sure the family stays connected. Naomi could even find work here if she wanted. Something part-time, of course, so she'd have time for family obligations. Family obligations, I repeated. Holiday dinners. Charity events. The sorts of things that help maintain our standing in the community. She sipped her wine. After all, appearances matter. And your absence will look rather pointed, won't it? There it was. The insult wrapped in silk. The suggestion that I was still not quite good enough, but they'd tolerate me if I played by their rules. Caleb stood up. We're done here. What? Caleb, sit down. I'm just trying to. You're trying to control us. Well, even now. He pulled out his wallet, dropped enough cash on the table to cover our meals and theirs. You broke the one rule we set. One dinner with no lines crossed. You couldn't even manage that. I stood too, slinging my purse over my shoulder. My hands weren't shaking this time. Felt calm. Clear. Thank you for dinner, I said quietly. We won't be doing this again. Patricia's face flushed. You're making a scene. No, I'm making an exit. I turned to Caleb. Ready. We walked out together. Behind us, I heard Theodore calling after us, but we didn't stop. Didn't look back. The cool evening air hit my face, and I realized I was smiling. The fallout started the next morning. We were already in Seattle, unpacking boxes in our new house, when my phone started lighting up. Social media posts, shared stories, screenshots of text conversations. Patricia had gone nuclear. She'd posted on her personal Facebook page something about ungrateful children and manipulative spouses. She'd called friends, family members, anyone who would listen. The narrative was clear. I'd stolen her son. Caleb had abandoned his family. We were selfish, cruel, heartless. I scrolled through it all with a strange sense of detachment. You should see this, I said, handing Caleb my phone. He read through the posts, his expression darkening. She's lost her mind. She's scared, I corrected. Scared people do desperate things. And desperate it was. But Patricia had forgotten something crucial. In the age of screenshots and receipts, lies don't last long. Amanda called me that afternoon. Naomi, I hope this is okay, but I shared what really happened at that dinner. Multiple people asked me about Patricia's posts, and I couldn't just let her lie about you. Then my former coworker. My husband told his golf buddies about Theodore showing up at your house to intimidate you. People are talking. Then Constance. I made a few calls. Clarified a few things. Patricia's version of events is falling apart rather quickly. By the end of the week, the social circle Patricia had weaponized had turned on her. Not because they particularly cared about me, but because she'd overplayed her hand. She'd made her war against me too public, too vicious. And in doing so, she'd revealed exactly who she was. 3 business partners who'd invested with Theodore quietly pulled out. Nothing dramatic. Just polite emails about pursuing other opportunities. But Caleb knew what it meant. His father's reputation was damaged. Patricia's charity board asked her to step down. Too much drama, they said. Bad optics. We need someone who can focus on the cause, not personal vendettas. Victoria called Caleb, crying. They're blaming me too. People keep asking me if I knew what Mom and Dad said to Naomi. They're acting like I was complicit. You were there, Caleb said simply. You didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I was caught off guard. So was Naomi. But she handled it with grace. You just sat there and let it happen. Victoria hung up without another word. I should have felt vindicated. Part of me did. But mostly I felt tired. Tired of the drama, the manipulation, the endless power games. I'd wanted a family when I married Caleb. Instead, I'd gotten a battlefield. Do you regret it? I asked him one night as we sat on our new porch, watching the Seattle rain. Regret what? Standing up to them. Moving. All of it. He thought about it for a long moment. I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it. 2 months into our Seattle life, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't legal. Just cream-colored stationery with Patricia's handwriting on the front. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. An apology letter. Or at least an attempt at one. Dear Naomi, it began. I've had time to reflect on my behavior, and I realize I may have been too harsh. Theodore and I were only trying to protect our son. I hope you can understand that mothers sometimes struggle with letting go. I read the rest of the letter. It was full of justifications, explanations, reasons why her behavior, while perhaps excessive, came from a place of love. It ended with an invitation to visit for the holidays. Chance to start fresh. Hope that we could all move forward as a family. I set the letter down and picked up my coffee. Had gone cold while I was reading. What does it say? Caleb asked. She's sorry that I misunderstood her intentions. He winced. That's not an apology. No, it's a negotiation. She's offering to tolerate me if we come back into the fold. I looked at the letter again. There's not a single acknowledgement of what she actually did wrong. Just excuses for why she did it. Are you going to respond? Thought about it. About writing back, trying to explain boundaries one more time. About the energy it would take. About the inevitable cycle of hurt and half apologies that would follow. No, I said. I don't think I am. They're going to see that as proof you're unreasonable. Let them. I folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. I spent a year trying to be good enough for people who were never going to accept me. I'm done auditioning for a role I don't even want anymore. Caleb pulled me close. I'm sorry you had to deal with them. I'm sorry you grew up with them. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the rain. Somewhere in the distance, a ferry horn sounded. This was our life now. 3,000 miles from people who would never see me as more than an outsider. And I was okay with that. 6 months later, Theodore called. Not Patricia. Theodore. We'd like to visit, he said without preamble. No, Caleb said. Excuse me. I said no. You're not coming to our house. Caleb, we're trying to make amends here. Are you? Because Mom's letter sure didn't sound like amends. It sounded like blame management. Theodore sighed. She's struggling with this. You're her son. You have to understand how hard this is for her. And Naomi is my wife. Why is it that I'm expected to understand Mom's feelings, but she's never been asked to understand Naomi's? Silence on the other end. Then, we just want to talk. Just the three of us. Man to man. Naomi will be present for any conversation we have, Caleb said. That's not negotiable. She's the reason we're in this position in the first place. No, Dad. You're the reason. You and Mom. You created this situation the moment you decided my wife wasn't good enough. Another pause. When Theodore spoke again, his voice was harder. If that's how you feel, then I don't see much point in continuing this conversation. Neither do I, Caleb said and hung up. He set the phone down and rubbed his face. They're never going to get it, are they? Probably not, I said gently. Some people are more invested in being right than being in relationship. I keep hoping they'll wake up, realize what they're losing. They might. Or they might double down. I took his hand. Either way, it's not on us to fix them. A year passed. Then two. We built a life in Seattle that had nothing to do with the Whitmore legacy. Caleb thrived at his new job. I started teaching part-time at a community college. We made friends who knew us as ourselves, not as extensions of some family empire. Victoria reached out occasionally. Tentative texts asking how we were. She never mentioned our parents unless Caleb asked directly. Lawrence sent birthday cards with generic messages inside. They were trying in their way. We responded politely but didn't push for more. Then came the message I'd been half expecting, half dreading. Constance had passed away. Peacefully in her sleep. The funeral would be in 3 days. We should go, I said. Caleb looked surprised. You want to go? She stood up for me when no one else did. I want to pay my respects. Pause. But only if you're comfortable with it. Your parents will be there, he said. I know. We flew back for the funeral. The service was beautiful. Held at a historic church with more flowers than I'd ever seen in one place. The entire social elite of Ridgeway Heights turned out. Old money, old families, old grudges temporarily set aside. Patricia and Theodore were in the front row. They saw us arrive but didn't acknowledge us. Victoria gave a small wave. Lawrence nodded. After the service, people gathered at Constance's estate. We stayed for a respectable hour, speaking to distant relatives and old family friends. Several people commented on how well we looked. How happy. A few asked pointed questions about when we'd move back. We deflected politely. We were about to leave when Patricia approached. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Caleb, she said. Her voice was softer than usual, almost tentative. Mom. They stared at each other. Years of unspoken hurt hung between them. Your grandmother spoke very highly of Naomi, Patricia said finally. Before she passed. She said Naomi had more class than our entire family combined. And blinked. That sounded like Constance. She also said I was a fool who'd driven away my son for no good reason. Patricia's hands twisted around her clutch purse. She wasn't wrong. Is this an apology? Caleb asked carefully. It's an acknowledgement. Patricia looked at me directly for the first time in 2 years. I was cruel to you. Deliberately so. I told myself I was protecting my son, but really I was protecting my own ego. My own idea of what his life should look like. The words hung in the air. They sounded rehearsed but sincere. Like she'd practiced them but actually meant them. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. I don't even know if I deserve a chance to rebuild this. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I did wrong. Finally. Took a breath. What changed? Losing my mother. Realizing she was right about me. Realizing I was becoming exactly what I hated about my own upbringing. A pause. And seeing you two at the funeral. You looked happy. Truly happy. And I realized I'd rather have a son who's happy 3,000 miles away than miserable under my roof. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. Patricia nodded. She looked like she wanted to say more, but Theodore appeared at her elbow. We should go, he said stiffly. He didn't look at me. Didn't look at Caleb. Just stood there like a man at a business meeting he hadn't wanted to attend. Theodore, Patricia said. Not now, Patricia. And there it was. The core problem laid bare. Patricia might be capable of growth, of change, of actual reflection. But Theodore wasn't. He was still the man who valued control over connection, appearance over authenticity. Patricia's face fell. She looked at Caleb, then at me. I understand if you can't forgive me, but if you ever wanted to talk, I'd like that. Just talk. No expectations. She walked away with her husband, her shoulders slightly slumped. Caleb and I left the estate shortly after. In the car he was quiet. What are you thinking? Yes. That my mother might actually be capable of change. And my father never will be. He stared out at the passing scenery. I don't know which one is sadder. You don't have to choose between them. Don't I? If she wants a relationship and he refuses to participate, what then? Then you deal with it when it happens. I took his hand. We're not obligated to make this easy for them. They made it hard. They get to live with that. 3 weeks after Constance's funeral, Caleb made a decision. He didn't discuss it with me first, which was unusual. He just came home one day with papers in his hand and a determined look on his face. I filed for a legal name change, he said. I set down the book I'd been reading. What? I'm dropping Whitmore. I'll be Caleb Morrison now. Morrison was my grandmother's maiden name. He sat beside me. I should have asked you first, but I needed to do this while I still had the courage. Why Morrison? Because Constance was the only one who saw you for who you actually are. The only one who stood up for you when it mattered. He handed me the papers. She left me a letter. Did you know that? Her lawyer gave it to me at the funeral. What did it say? That she was proud of me for choosing my own path. That she regretted not doing the same when she was young. That family is what you build, not what you're born into. His voice cracked slightly. She said you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and she was sorry she didn't tell you that before she died. I felt tears prick my eyes. Caleb, you don't have to change your name for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. The Whitmore name comes with expectations I can't meet anymore. With a legacy I don't want to carry. Morrison feels like a fresh start. I looked at the papers. Caleb James Morrison. It suited him somehow. Do Victoria and Lawrence know? I told them yesterday. Victoria cried. Lawrence said he understood. And your parents? I haven't told them yet. I'll call them after the paperwork goes through. He took a deep breath. This is the last separation, Naomi. After this, we're really done with all of it. Caleb called his parents 6 weeks later, after the name change became official. I didn't listen to the conversation. He took the call in his office with the door closed. But I heard the raised voices. Heard something crash, probably a mug hitting his desk. When he emerged 40 minutes later, his face was pale but calm. How did they take it? I asked, though I already knew. Dad said I was disgracing the family. That I was being manipulated. That this proved I'd chosen you over my heritage. Caleb poured himself a glass of water. Mom said she understood. Which made Dad angrier. I'm sorry. Don't be. Done. I told him that if he wanted any kind of relationship with me going forward, he needed to accept 2 things. My name and my wife. Both are non-negotiable. What did he say? He hung up. Caleb drank his water. But Mom stayed on the line. We talked for another 10 minutes. She asked about our life here. About your teaching. About whether we were happy. What did you tell her? The truth. That we're happier than we've ever been. That night, I found myself pulling out Patricia's old apology letter. The one she'd sent years ago, full of justifications and non-apologies. I compared it mentally to the woman who'd approached us at the funeral. The woman who'd admitted fault without excuses. People could change. Not always. Not easily. But sometimes. I wrote her a letter. Not an invitation back into our lives. Just an acknowledgement. A small opening in a door that had been firmly closed. Dear Patricia, I wrote. Thank you for what you said at the funeral. I can't promise reconciliation or regular visits or anything that looks like what you might want. But if you'd like to talk sometimes, just talk. I'm willing to try. 5 years later, we celebrated Thanksgiving in our Seattle home. The dining room was full. My parents, who I'd always been good enough for. Caleb's grandmother's sister, a distant relative who'd reached out after the name change. Our friends from the city. A neighbor who had nowhere else to go. And Patricia. Just Patricia. Theodore had stayed home, still unable to bend. But Patricia had flown out alone, nervous and trying too hard, but present. She'd apologized again when she arrived. A real apology this time. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I'm sorry for the cruelty. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to earn your place in this family. You never did. I was just too blind to see it. Accepted. Not because I forgot, but because holding on to anger had stopped serving me years ago. Now she sat at our table, looking slightly out of place but genuinely trying. She asked my mother about her garden. She laughed at our friends' jokes. She helped with dishes. After dinner, as people gathered in the living room, she pulled me aside. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me a chance I didn't deserve. You're still his mother, I said. And you did the work to change. That matters. Theodore thinks I'm betraying him by being here. That's his choice to make. Not yours. She nodded slowly. I wasted so many years worrying about the wrong things. Appearances, status, legacy. And I almost lost my son because of it. She looked at me. You were never the problem, Naomi. You were just the mirror that showed me who I'd become. Later, after Patricia had gone to her hotel and our guests had left, Caleb and I cleaned up the kitchen together. It had become our ritual. Peaceful, quiet work done side by side. Your mom seemed different, I said. She is different. Took her 5 years and losing almost everything, but she is. He dried a plate. Dad will probably never change. But at least mom's trying. Do you think we'll ever have a relationship with him again? Honestly, I don't know. And I've made peace with that. He set the plate down and pulled me close. I used to think family meant accepting people no matter what they did. Now I know it means building something with people who actually value you. I leaned into him. Was it worth it? All of it. Every single second. He kissed the top of my head. I chose you over their approval. I'd make that choice 1,000 times over. We finished the dishes in comfortable silence. Outside, Seattle rain pattered against the windows. Inside, our home was warm and full in ours. I'd spent years trying to be good enough for people who'd never accept me. Years walking on eggshells, measuring every word, second-guessing every choice. And then I'd stopped, not because I'd won some battle or proved them wrong, but because I'd realized something fundamental. I didn't need their approval to be worthy. I didn't need their acceptance to be enough. I'd always been enough. I just needed to believe it myself. The in-laws who declared me unworthy had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Not everyone earns the right to judge your worth. And sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is simply walking away. I was never asking to be good enough for them. I was choosing to be free. And freedom, I'd learned, tastes better than any approval ever could.